My entire life, I've felt that I was in a race against a shadowy figure, reaching for my legs, my arms, my psyche, anything to cause a stumble. My name is Luis Islas, and I was born into an undocumented immigrant family. Now, as some of you might know, when you're born into an undocumented family, sometimes moving around becomes normal. Town to town, state to state. My family was constantly looking for jobs that had the promise of doing one thing: putting food on the table. When I was around 6 years old, my family decided to move to Portland, Oregon, with hopes that a family connection would be able to help my father land a job as a waiter. No one would have been able to foresee that a period of homelessness was waiting for us upon arrival. I still smile when I think about the times my mother would take me to the local Goodwill, just so that I could play with the toys on the shelves. Swinging the foldable chair down from the rack, she would crack open a book and sit mid-aisle while I'd play, sometimes for hours. When it was time to leave, I would walk amongst the cluttered shelves, making sure to place my newfound friends in places where I'd be able to find them again. And I still look at my mother in awe when I think about the time she would volunteer at the local youth branch and sift through piles and piles of used clothes, just so she could find the least tattered, used items that I would be able to wear to school the next day. An agreement to share a garage in California with my grandmother was the only way we were able to make it out, albeit in a city once dubbed the murder capital of the US, East Palo Alto, or EPA. Now, many of you might be familiar with the Palo Alto area today. Sitting right across Highway 101 from where EPA is, it's a place where Stanford University is. Facebook's headquarters is now located there. EPA, though, sitting just on the other side of the highway, has historical ties to segregation and the practice of marginalizing communities. Historically, this was a place where Black and brown folks were pushed over because it was mainly swamp and marshland. This was a place where developers thought that the only people that could live over there, or should live over there, were members of the BIPOC community. I began to realize that making it out of there was something only fools thought of. I was around 9 years old when I saw my first dead body. A man laying face down in a creek near the schoolyard at recess. I remember the look on my parents' faces when I told them so casually, so nonchalantly about the incident. It was a look of utter shock and confusion, a look clearly showing their panic as they wondered why they had subjected their child to such a thing. I was 11 years old when I saw the next one. 12 years old when I was first asked to join a gang. 13 years of age when my parents decided to take a stand. You see, it was around this age in my life when things started to take a turn. When you reach a certain age in communities where there's a lack of opportunity, resources, and support, the only way people learn to find a sense of purpose or security is to band together, to make gangs for lack of a stable environment. And by the time I became a teen, this was a place I began to get beat up and jumped after school by different members of different gangs. By this time, most of my friends had already joined gangs, and were slowly becoming another statistic. These people who would beat me up after school would tell me things to try to get me to be that statistic. They would say things like, if you join our gang, or if you sold rock on the corner of the streets, you'll be able to make a name for yourself. You have money for your family. You have the respect of the gang, the protection of the gang. You know, looking back, it's a wonder why my parents pushed me so much growing up. My mother barely graduated from high school. My father left after the second grade to make bricks in the hot Mexican sun. And yet they would always stress the importance of education. You may lose your house one day, your car, heck, you'll even lose us, but the one thing you'll never lose is what you learn, my mother would say, which, by the way, is a horrible rendition of my mother. Which is why at the age of 14, my family decided to move to Boise, Idaho. Talk about a culture shock. My father still tears up when he recounts what I said upon seeing the school I was to attend, saying, "Wow, I thought these schools only existed in movies." It was here that for the first time in my life I was able to walk to school. Something I had never been able to do at any point in my life, really. I was even given a bike I could ride around my neighborhood with. Something I was scared to do in the very beginning. Flashbacks hit me with every push of the pedal to 2 summers before when my bike was almost stolen from right underneath me, just as I was taking it for a ride down the block. I even joined my first extracurricular activities: basketball, soccer, track. Riding my bike to and from practice was one of the most relaxing experiences I had had up until that point. This couldn't be real. Not for someone like me. Don't get me wrong, I miss my friends. I miss the sleepovers I would have with my cousins, sneaking out down the block to watch a street fight about to go down behind the rows of parked cars along the hot, dark alley. But over the years, I began to see what having access to resources in a public school system in a predominantly white community did to my curiosity. I began to think about college. Something no one in my family had ever done or even knew how to apply for. Me being the hard-headed person that I was ashamed to ask for help. It seemed all of my peers were all prepping for their ACTs and SATs, taking the prep courses, filling out college applications, while I was riding my bike a good 25 to 30 minutes to the downtown Boise library just so I could figure out what those acronyms meant. And would Google how to apply for college. And excitement began to grow around me as I thought about the possible majors I could study and areas of study that I could embark on. Now even those dimly lit library halls couldn't hide the smile growing across those sunburnt, sweaty cheeks of mine. I gushed about my experiences via MySpace to my friends back in California, if some of you can remember MySpace. The excitement spilling onto the keyboard as I frantically typed away with errors and misspelling every other word. I didn't care. I just had to tell them. Over time, the responses became few and far between. And then slowly over the years, the news started to roll in. Gilbert's gone to prison for armed robbery. Vicente was killed in a drive-by. Jose was stabbed across the street from her own school. I went on to go to college. I became the first in my family to graduate with their bachelor's and then their master's. I even worked and lived abroad as a Peace Corps volunteer in sub-Saharan Africa, coming back to work with various nonprofits to address food insecurity, instability, disaster relief. But what my resume won't show, and what the smile on my face worked so hard to try to hide, is that I spent the last few years of my life resenting myself. Filled with guilt, stemming from an unshakable thought that I had abandoned my community. I saw the violence touching the lives of those I loved. I saw the income disparities hitting block to block, street to street, affecting those who had no choice but to live in a vicious cycle of poverty, a poverty so violent it found a way to eat away at their pockets, as well as their lives. Over the years, their faces began to fade away. The memories felt more and more like a dream I had somehow misinterpreted as reality. And it's only been until recently that I've been able to look back and think about this experience with new eyes and a new perspective. In reality, I'm nobody special. I'm just another first-generation Latino trying day in and day out to push past disparities and roadblocks that are put in front of me. And if I'm being honest, there are multiple heroes to the story, such as my parents. Had they not taken me out of that environment, I very well could have ended up in a prison or worse. However, the real star of the show would be the privilege that came with those newfound opportunities in Boise. I spent a lot of time thinking about those whose lives have been lost due to their lack of opportunity. Had they had access to the same tools and resources that I had, where would they be? Where would we be? Nowadays, many of us find ourselves in positions where we too can help others outrun those shadowy figures, where we can extend a hand and help those before they stumble. In a world full of opportunity, but also full of skepticism, be the person that opens the door for others regardless of where they came from. I'm just one example of what a sliver of opportunity, equity, and privilege can do in the life of one person and the ripple effect it has on countless others. And if this is just a sliver, I can't wait for the day when the doors open wide and opportunity is granted on a grander scale to those who are just a statistic. Thank you.